Hello, Pete Caliendo here in the Chicago studios. That is my good friend for 30 years, Bill Holmberg. If you're on YouTube, you can see him. He's there in Miami. We'll talk about Bill in a second. And welcome everybody on Facebook Live. I'm Pete Caliendo, baseball outside the box host. We are thrilled that you could join us. We got another great show. Hopefully everybody's staying safe. Don't forget, check us out, Baseball Outside the Box, and also on YouTube, Peter Caliendo, Facebook. We're all over the place. Share your show. You know, this is the show that loves to interview people that are the best in the business all over the world, not just in the U.S., but everywhere in the world. And we love and understand our listeners very well. We know what you want. We keep getting requests, and we bring it to you. So, again, we are thrilled that everybody around the world is joining us, especially now that everybody's at home. There's a great time to learn and become educated. My good friend, Bill Holmberg, on the other side. Let me tell you real fast, you know, we go quick with the bios and we get right into the substance because we put the bios on Facebook. We put them on the podcast. We put them on the show notes. We got them everywhere. So don't worry about that. You'll know everything about Bill. And listen, Bill and I go back 30 years. And he might correct me in a minute, but I remember 30 years ago, I believe it was with the Italian Baseball Convention. And I was speaking at it, didn't know anything then and still don't. And I remember Bill being there probably thinking, who is this guy? But we became great friends, almost like brothers. He's a brother to me. Listen, he's done a lot in the game. It's incredible. He was one of the coaches with the World Baseball Classic with the Italian national team. He is now the pitching coach with Mike Piazza on the World Baseball Classic team. That's a great position. He's a great pitching guy, but he's a great baseball guy in general. He's also the coordinator and instructor for MLB with all over Europe and Africa for baseball instruction. So he educates coaches, players, does a lot of their camps. He's got a great background. He'll tell you more as we go into the show. So let's get rocking and rolling. Bill Holmberg, what's up, buddy?
How you doing, Pete? Good to see you again. It's always good to see you, and I'm very happy to be here with you today.
Yeah, I'd rather see you in person, but unfortunately you're in Miami seeing your mom. You got stuck there because of the virus. But that's a great time to get a lot of time to spend with your mom now. So that's got to be, a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's been a blessing in disguise. It's, I'd like to be home with my family, of course. I've been here for 3 weeks and my flight got canceled about 10 days ago. So I'm just waiting for flights to go back into Europe. And hopefully when they do, I'll be able to grab one and pick one up and go back and see my family.
Well, folks, so you know, Bill Holmberg is originally from Miami. He went to school, I believe, in Miami. They went to school together with Jim Henry, a good friend of us here in Chicago with the Pitch and Hit Club. And he met a great lady in Italy, married, and stayed there. I mean, that's the life in Italy. He could tell you that's an unbelievable life. Great food, great romance, great everything. You name it, they got it all. We want to wish, and by the way, I've got my Italian espresso. I've got my espresso here that I'm drinking. For all our Italian friends, I've got the Italian national team hat. Hey, Holmberg, I got it all. I got the biscotti. Look at this. I'm prepared for you. What's up, man? Tell us. I know it's tough, but the Italians are making the best out of what's going on there. Tell us what you saw before you left with all the Italians there.
I think our problem basically started when, at the beginning, when we knew we had the problem with the virus. But unfortunately, they put down a quarantine, but it wasn't strong enough. So a lot of people, a lot of the younger people especially, sort of didn't really take it as serious as they should have. And that's why we find ourselves in the position we're in right now. Just because of the fact that, and I hope the same thing doesn't happen here in the States, and people respect this quarantine and try to keep this distancing and make sure that we can eliminate this problem before it gets to be really too big.
Yeah, we've been talking about it on a show. Every show we've had, we've told the people, hey, we know it's tough to be home a couple of weeks, but enjoy it with your family. It's important for everybody to stay in and let this thing die out, hopefully, and we'll all get back to going what we love to do, whether it's baseball or anything else in life. So we want to wish all our friends, I've got relatives, as you know, in Italy. They're all doing well, thank God. But we wish everybody in Italy the best. I know some of you are watching on Facebook, waving to you. I had my vino. I think, I do have my vino. I got one here, my Italian vino. Look at this. I got great stuff here. I'm going to have this later on tonight.
You don't even drink.
All right, Mr. Holmberg, let's get to the substance of this great show that we love to put on. And you're going to be a great guest for this because you got international experience. But I want you to start off with what you currently are doing with MLB around, Europe and South Africa or Africa.
Well, basically, in the past 3 or 4 years, we put on camps for under 18s or under 15 players. And also, besides that, which probably is a much bigger piece, is coaches' education. So we've done what we call CDPs, coaches development programs, and we do those all over Europe and also in Africa. I did one in Uganda. I've done them in South Africa, of course, all over Europe. In fact, we had a very long trip planned out for April into the Eastern European bloc, which you know about. We're going to go to Russia, to Vilnius, Ukraine, et cetera, and we ended up having that canceled because of the fact that they have this virus problem right now. So,
Bill, what's the main focus when you talk about the coaches program? What's the focus of the program and what are the main aspects of the teaching part that is important so that way coaches can do what they need to do? Especially in Europe or even like in Africa?
Yeah, I think this is going to be true everywhere. My main emphasis when I do the coaching development programs are 1, the throwing and pitching, 2, the hitting, and then 3, the position-specific defense. Those are basically the 3 or 4 things that I emphasize. But my emphasis, being that I'm a pitching coach, is more on the throwing side of it. So I'm trying to develop arms. And to this point, we've had some good success. No big leaguers yet, but a lot of guys that have signed out of Italy and also out of Europe in general. So we've been trying to push the throwing part of it because we know that we might not get enough ABs. Position players might not get enough ABs. So we know we can develop arms and we can develop probably catchers pretty easily. So that's where our emphasis has been.
And folks, if you didn't know, also Bill scouted internationally with the Cubs. He also ran the academy in Italy, and we're going to talk about the academy because what I'd like to do is, since you're talking about throwing and pitching a little bit, let's talk about a little bit about what you did at the academy, what the system was a little bit, and why you guys organized that academy in Italy.
Well, we started in 2004, and it was one of Riccardo Fricari's ideas, which is a great idea. He did a really good job with player development in Italy when he was president of the federation. And basically, we started out in 2004, and we sort of, more or less felt our way around in the dark because we really didn't have a really great idea about how you should develop an academy. So my first years were basically, I worked with the club teams, which was pretty close in Italy, but I'd never had the elite athletes. So it was a little bit of a change of mindset, and we did that over time. Our program became really strong as we went because it was constantly changing, it was constantly metamorphosizing. So we just were able to develop that program over years, not months or even 1 or 2 years, but over 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 years. And I took a lot of stuff from a lot of different coaches, like a Wolfert or like a Brett Strom or like a Mike Marshall, and I consolidated all the information into something that I considered my program. And that's basically what we did. I had some great assistants. I had Daniele Santalupo and Davide Sartini who were with me, working with me, and I had Pedro Hova and Enrique Gonzalez, who were helping me they were 2 coaches from Cuba that did a tremendous job. So I was really lucky. I had a really good group. I had a good group of coaches, and I had a good group of, and eventually we developed our program and our curriculum, let's call it, into something that was really, really, really positive. And we had a lot of guys signed, and more than anything, over the time that I'd been the director at the Italian Academy, we never had an arm injury. We've had a couple guys that had shoulders, but they were already pre-existing conditions, which we've heard a lot of lately, but those are pre-existing conditions when they got hurt afterwards. So we were lucky. No Tommy Johns. And people say, well, maybe, they didn't throw hard enough. Well, they did. We had a couple guys, 5 or 6 guys that threw 95 miles an hour. So it wasn't a question of velocity. It was more a question of our program and how we developed our players and how we we put health first over everything else.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about that because I'm looking here on Facebook, man. We got a lot of people that you know. We got Roberto Ballarotto, a good friend from Montefiascone, Italy. I mean, there's people. That's why I was waving. We got a good buddy, Jeff Crushell, who you know because he's with MLB and comes in and does all the development work for the academies.
Yes.
I can't mention everybody. I'm going to try to mention as many people as possible. At the academies, because this academies, you got the Italian academy, but then MLB has academies all over the world. The emphasis on these academies when it comes to throwing, I think is important because I want to get into the velocity too a little bit. So what are some of the things that you guys focus on to make sure that the throwing is correct?
Well, we emphasize arm care first and foremost. Okay, that's the most important thing, is us making sure that they're in a position to be able to do what we ask them to do. So we will get kids and prepare them through, it could be the Jaeger program, it could be wrist weights and iron balls. There's a lot of different programs that we run, and we try to make it very specific to the player that's in front of us. That's number one. Number two is we have a throwing program, which is actually 7 or 8 pieces of a program that we run every single day before we start practice. And the emphasis is not specifically on getting loose. The emphasis is specifically on making your mechanics better. Okay, your arm action, your body action, how we're trying to use our lower half to throw, because for me, ground force is a huge part of the equation. So what I'm trying to do is teach the players through our throwing program how they should utilize their arm and their bodies correctly to be able to throw well and with good health.
And Bill, you mentioned a key word there. I want to stick on this word. You said ground force. Are we talking about, both feet getting on the ground before the motion starts occurring?
Well, what we're trying to do is, a lot of times that I have a presentation I've given around Europe in the last, I just got done doing the Spanish baseball coaches convention up in Asturias, Spain. And, we're talking basically about using the bottom half to throw the ball. And, you see some of these guys with that, I think there's a guy that does some stuff with Brent Porcho, I don't remember his last name, but he's a guy that uses a lot of stuff with the bottom half with med balls. We've started to incorporate med balls through Jeff Crushell. Okay. We've been doing med balls for the last 16 years. So it's nothing new. Right. It's just what I tried to do is take Jeff's stuff. Jeff is one of the best strength and conditioning coaches I know in the world. Okay?
Absolutely.
I've been lucky to work with him and with Chad in South Africa, and a lot of different strength and conditioning coaches over the years have been really, really good. I've been lucky to take things from them and be able to use them as sounding boards to try to get new and better ways to be able to teach. So our med ball drills now are very specific. So what we try to do is break down the movement to be specific to the throwing movement for especially pitchers. So that's what we're doing.
Where now, when it comes to the body, where are the critical areas to strengthen that are important when it comes to throwing or pitching? Because are there areas that are weaker, stronger, that create issues in the long run? And then I'm going to get a little bit into the velocity part.
Well, you can, the main thing for me is the back foot. I see a lot of problems with the back foot with the pitchers. A lot of guys going on their toes. I see it all over the world. And I'm trying to get them more to work off a flat foot and then pushing in towards home plate instead of going on their toe. That's been the most prevalent problem that I've seen all over the world. There's all kinds of different things you can go through. But if you say, what is the number one thing that you've seen all over the world that creates problems for young pitchers because it creates early rotation with the front side, it's probably the back foot. And that's what I emphasize a lot of. Yes.
And you mentioned earlier, you said, hey, injuries, you've been very lucky with it. Not lucky, it's actually because you've worked at it. So the key components of training to help reduce injuries, in your opinion, what would some of the components be?
Well, I use a Mike Marshall program with the wrist weights and the iron balls for many years, and it was extremely beneficial. And Pete, the thing is it's not a question of what I think. It's not a question of what you think. It's a question. The question we need to put or throw out there is ask our players what they think, because they're the ones that know. They know better than we do about what's beneficial to them and what's not beneficial to them. So when we started a program, the first time I started, it was more or less an experiment for the first 3 or 4 months of the academy. And we developed a program that way, incorporating Wolfer stuff, incorporating Marshall stuff. All the stuff that you see that Driveline's doing now, that's been in the oven for a long time at the Italian Academy.
Sure.
So we've done all that stuff for a long time. And
you guys just kept it a secret.
Well, yeah, I shared it with a lot of people. The Dutch know, I worked a lot with the Dutch, a lot with the French. I work with all these guys now, the Germans, the Spanish, Eastern Europeans. I mean, I'm all over the place. But the main thing is I want to separate and share some of this information with people, because I think it's going to be very beneficial. I've invented some things at work. The people in Italy know I've invented some different, like a foot plate for the back foot. I can send you a picture of it and show you how it works. It's extremely beneficial. But there's a lot of different things that we do use. And remember one thing, there's not one size fits all. We have to make sure that we can adapt our programs to the individual. I learned this from Jeff a long time ago. We have to be as specific as possible to be able to be as effective as we possibly can. And, in Italy, I don't have a lot of, in Europe in general, we don't have a lot of inventory, There's not a lot of players. So the players we do have that are athletic and that could possibly become good players for player development for them in the future, we can't make any mistakes. So that's been my mantra, is not make any mistakes. Listen to the people that know more than I do concerning strength and conditioning and basic human movement, which is another phase. I know that you talked to Martijn Nijhoff about the human movement aspect, and that guy is really, really first class. These guys are cutting edge guys, and I've been able to work with them for the last 4 or 5 years with Franz Bosch. So a lot of that stuff that they're doing, we work together on. Which I can't take credit for, but I can tell you that we've been exposed to it, and we've taken a lot of the good things, the great things that they do, and incorporated that into our practice plans also.
Hey, I'm going to talk about practice plans in a second, but I'm looking here on Facebook. We're going to wave to Lucio Taschin. Lucio's at home also in Italy. Hey, buddy, how are you? Mio amigo, come stai? Stai bene? Spero stai bene e la tua famiglia pure. Hey, listen, when you first get a player, a pitcher, you're talking about, or even just basic player, there's evaluation that goes on with the body, the movements before you even start anything.
Yeah, we have, as you know now, a big thing is screening, right? So screening is going to help you understand about how much flexibility that everybody has in each one of their joints going up the kinetic chain, so screening is a huge part of it, because I can't ask players to do something that they're not capable of doing.
Right.
So I have to make sure that these guys are capable physically of doing what I'm asking them to do physically and technically. So that's a big piece that I think we've overlooked. There's been 2 things that I think I've overlooked in the last 10 years that I think that I want to incorporate in what I'm doing now. Is number one is the screening aspect. I want to be able to have a better idea about what my guys can do and what they can't do. And the second part of it, which I really didn't put a lot of emphasis on, but Dave Turgeon from the Pittsburgh Pirates, a really good friend of mine, talked about this last year when I went to Instructional League. He talked about competition. And what we don't teach our guys, and you probably get, people say, well, in the States, they play a lot of games. It's because they play a lot of games that they're better than the Europeans. Well, I don't think that's exactly true. I think the competition level in the States forces the players to compete. And what we haven't done in Europe is really teach the kids how to compete. And that's another piece of the puzzle that I think is fundamental in developing players, teaching the kids to compete. How do you do that? There's a lot of different ways to do that. But the basic thing is forcing the player during practice to compete every single pitch or every single out, every single inning, et cetera, et cetera.
Hey, Bill, since we're on that, and folks, I'm Pete Caliendo, host of Baseball Outside the Box. That's Bill Holmberg, the World Baseball Classic Italian national team pitching coach. I know JP Morosi is going to want to talk to you. JP, is a great Italian fan, and obviously an Italian American, also an Italian fan. Had him on the show not too long ago, just a great interview. But when you talk about competing, like you're saying, give our coaches and our players, or anybody that's listening on Facebook or YouTube or on a podcast anywhere in the world, the idea: how can we do that? Now, how can you take the players you're talking about in Europe? What are some of the things we can do to make things more competitive for them?
Well, I'll give you one example. I got some examples from Dave when I was over at Instruction, and I was watching what they were doing with the hitters. They were putting two cages side by side, or actually two hitters side by side with a screen in the middle, and there are two different machines. So they'd have a curveball machine and a fastball machine, or a coach throwing BP, and they would compete. They would actually log the number of hits, the number of solid contacts, the number of whatever. Okay, and they'd log all that stuff up, and they'd force the player to understand that this is always a competition. I mean, when you get in the box, it's a competition. There's no such thing as BP, taking BP just to take BP. And that's what our players do. A lot of times they just go through the motions with that, and we can't allow them to do that if we want to maximize. Especially now in the States, you're seeing all the practice time being cut. Well, whenever you do have practice, you got to make sure that you're able to utilize that practice absolutely the best way you possibly can. So on the hitting side, you can do the same thing on defense. Pitchers, you put two pitchers up there and do a bullpen, and have one compete against the other for strikes. See how well they can throw a curveball in the dirt with two strikes, or a fastball up and in, or whatever the situation might be. Try to force them. We talk about situational hitting a lot, but we don't talk about situational pitching a lot. And that is, to me, a fundamental part of practice and teaching the players how to compete. Is we have to also use situations to make them better when they do face a situation actually in the game condition.
I love that, because it's basically, we're saying, let's put these guys under more pressure in practice, under more pressure situations. And what I love now, something that I didn't think about, because I've known about the situational hitting. I've talked about it 2 years ago on a podcast about, regular batting practice. Just, you're wasting your time. I mean, you can get loose getting regular batting practice, but then you got to create situations. In Europe, I'm familiar with, I know you're starting to increase velocity in pitching, but at one point, they weren't facing guys that were very fast, and then they go internationally to compete, and they couldn't compete at that level. So let's talk about that and situational pitching, some ideas, and what guys should be doing in situational pitching. Can that be done in a bullpen too?
Well, the situational pitching is really easy. You just map out let's say a 30-pitch bullpen with specific things. You want to throw, let's say, fastballs and 0-0 counts, fastballs right down. Make sure they're in the middle of the plate down. Curveballs in the dirt with two strikes, fastballs up and in with two strikes. A very specific plan that's going to allow you to cover every situation that could possibly happen during a game, or close to every situation. So that's number one. Number two is, what we would do is, at the academy, we play in the World Championship. So we would go to, for example, the last time I was with the under-18 national team, we were in Japan. And what I would do, because I knew we didn't have the velo, okay, and we knew the game sped up when we saw these other teams from baseball playing countries, what I would do is I'd move the pitcher's mound about, let's say, a yard forward, closer to home plate. And obviously that would increase the reaction time that the hitter would be forced to adapt to. And that's number one. And number two is we would actually move the bases closer. So I sped up the game without doing anything. Did it help the pitchers? Actually, it did help the pitchers, because from front part of the mound, or if we left the mound where it was and moved home plate closer, they'd be forced to throw more downhill, which is what I like on my pitchers. Is I want them throwing
downhill.
Right. So it was extremely beneficial, and it was relatively easy to throw out there.
And here's what happens in a situational pitching, which I love it because you could take that and kind of use it for other aspects of the game. What happens when a young player's maybe not as consistent or failing at it? Do we just keep working at it?
There is no easy solution. Okay. And what people don't understand, and I could be wrong about this because it's been a couple of years since I've had information, but the average pitcher misses his spot by 6 to 8 inches. Okay. We know this from TrackMan. They're missing their spot. So I don't know how many people are out there that can throw, that have command of the strike zone. Yeah, you get those 10, 15 guys in the big leagues that have great command, but in general, we are giving in to command for velo.
Yeah, unless you're in Japan.
Yeah, so it's a really, to me, it's a very strange situation. To answer your question completely and straight off is, I would say that the key is continue to do it and just make adjustments. I see there's a lot of obvious flaws in the throwing mechanics that force or allow players to throw, not have command in the strike zone. Control and command, we know control is just throwing strikes. Command is actually throwing strikes where we want to throw strikes. But knowing what we know from TrackMan, there's a lot of guys that are missing pitches. So what do I want to have? Pitch quality, or do I want to have command? Well, I'll take pitch quality.
Quality.
Yes, over command, because command is such a hard thing to develop. And sometimes you'll never have guys that have command. I mean, you can work with them from now until the end of time, and they'll never be able to command the ball like, the fastball like they want. And people harp on commanding the fastball. I get it. I'd love to have that. And if they can't do it, what do you do then? Then what do you do? If they can't command the fastball, then what do you try to do? Well, I know what I try to do. I try to make sure that I throw backwards every once in a while to make sure that we can be effective and stay in the game, especially internationally.
And what about when people are talking about you got command and you got velocity? Are we working on these together? Because we definitely want to increase velocity. Let's not fool ourselves. Velocity helps. But we also have to be careful on the flip side. We increase velocity and we don't do certain things to strengthen our bodies. We can also get hurt. Now, you've done a great job because look at your academy coming out of Italy. I mean, it's proven what the program's done. So where do we start? Command, velocity, both together, and then the part about the injuries. I got all kinds of questions.
What came first, Pete?
Yeah, the egg or the chicken.
You know what I mean? It's for me, and people have been critical of me in Italy and around Europe, and I'll live with it. I'll wear it. I really don't care, because for me, the first thing is velo, and I'm trying to work on velocity. Why? Because velocity is going to give my players more opportunities, and whether it be in professional baseball or college baseball or whatever they end up doing, that's going to give them a look. So coaches have a tendency to dream on velo. They don't dream on 85 miles an hour that has a little bit of command. They just don't dream on that, because obviously velo is what talks nowadays. But for me, I'm working on velo first, and then I'm trying to slowly adapt my velocity to my control and command.
And how much does the movement pattern, now they call them movement patterns, we call them mechanics in the old days, potato, I don't know, but when you talk about movement patterns, if you've got pretty good movement patterns, that gives you an ability to have a little bit better control, even in your velocity.
No, undoubtedly. And part of it is because that's one of the reasons why we talk about back foot. We talk about the bottom half. The bottom half is a tendency to allow you, and this has been my experience again, to allow our pitchers to throw more strikes, because our basic problem with our arm injuries and also our command and control is it's the upper half that either is rotating early, the head's moving too much, our arms behind, our acromial line, all these different things that possibly could come up. They usually come up in the top half, not the bottom half. So the top half usually for me is a control and command killer. But again, I'm always going to work from the bottom up. So you just, you start from the feet, ankle, knee, hip, core, shoulder, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I'm going to work from down underneath up and try to command and use my legs to be able to throw the ball, and also to be able to allow me to have better command and control.
Hey, Bill, I'm glad you brought that up, because folks, Bill Holmberg, by the way, John McLaren says hello. I know there's a lot of people we could, Dimitri, hello, Dimitri. We got a lot of people that, matter of fact, Claudio Vecchi was on Facebook. We got Italians, we got Russians, we got everybody around the world on the show, and welcome everybody. But listen, the part that Bill talked about, the back foot plate, and plate, I believe what you call it plate strength, was it?
No, I just use, I mean, the back foot, I use a plate for the back foot to make sure that the players can't go on. It's a very simple thing. It's a piece of metal with a tip on it that comes out that forces a player to stay on the inside of his heel and the inside of his foot, instead of being able to go to his toe, which to me, early movement to your toe during your delivery allows you to open your front side. So front side for me is one of the causes of Tommy John, early rotation for me. That's my opinion, because it exposes the shoulder and the elbow.
Makes sense.
The thing is, if I can stay into my legs, especially in the backside, and drive forward, I have a better, you look at a guy like DeGrom, and I've done a presentation on DeGrom for the last 5 or 6 years. And Jacob DeGrom he was a rookie, I think, at that time. And I just was looking at some of his video, high-speed video, and I saw that, there are a lot of great things that he did with the lower half that I like to teach. So his lower half has some flaws, very few, but I mean, the guy's won the Cy Young Award. And, to be honest with you, I heard he was throwing really great with the Mets in spring training before they closed everything down. So, yeah, I think there's a correlation between bottom half mechanics and success and velo and control and command and being able to repeat your delivery. I think it's fundamental.
All right, hey, folks, we're going to have that foot plate. Bill's going to send me the picture of it. We'll put it on the show notes so at least they can see it. I think they have a pretty good idea. My Italian friends, my espresso's done. I can't even get up and go get some. I got my Italian hat for you. Waving to my Italian friends out there. Hey, Bill, I love this stuff, because you're working your way up. And now I got to ask you this. The control system seems to be in the head. The vision seems to control so much. I've gotten to the vision a great deal here in the U.S. lately. Tell me how you look at that when it comes to the head being, possibly the heaviest part of the body, the control system of the body, the vision, identifying locations, ultimately being the first thing that's gonna help you get the ball there. Is there training you do for that, or what do you work on when it comes to these things?
Well, we're at the academy. We did vision, testing. Obviously, we didn't have enough money to be able to do anything really similar to what we did when I was with the Cubs. They came out with a really good vision program when I was with the Cubs, but we weren't able to do that. Our stuff was very simple. But Jeff Crushell, again, he had a program for vision that we used. It was very effective, simple but very effective. And
give us an idea.
Well, basically,
even the simple things could be the best.
Yeah, I mean, he just had a whole program where we'd actually use those charts, the eye charts, to look at different things and try to pick up numbers on balls and stuff like that, which was very beneficial for us. Very extremely simple but extremely effective, because if I had something a little bit more let's say a program that was a little bit more difficult or just anything a little bit harder to understand might not have had the same effect.
And I get it because, folks, Bill and I are very fortunate. I mean, God bless. I don't know how it happened, but I get to travel the world, work with coaches and players, and there's a lot of great coaches out there that could be doing what we're doing. Sometimes you just have to be in the right place, right time, also. And we know a lot of the coaches, even in the U.S., younger coaches, even all over the world. We don't have all the equipment, all this stuff that's out there. But sometimes we have to figure out, like you said, numbers on baseballs or different color baseballs. We have to figure out ways to get pitchers or hitters or infielders too to be able to concentrate on certain things, because we can say concentrate, but if you can't train for it, it ain't gonna do you any good. So we understand. That's why I think sometimes some of the simple things that the average coach can use really helps coaches anywhere. It doesn't have to be the scientific, most complicated, most expensive items out there.
You've talked before, and it's very true. I mean, I've developed things so I look at a problem and I try to develop something that's going to help me alleviate that problem. And that's what I've done with a lot of different tools that I have when I was at the academy, now that I use now. But again, another part of this whole puzzle is what Martine talks about a lot in internal, external focus, and so the way that we teach is extremely important if we expect to have results, if that makes sense.
Sure.
Because that typical coach that stands on the mound, that's during a player's bullpen, he's standing there telling players or pitchers, bend your back more, or get your arm up, and that is totally worthless from my experience.
Sure.
What I try to do is I evaluate a player. I know what I'm looking for. When I see some flaws in the player's mechanics, I develop a drill that he can use, and he will go and develop that drill and actually throw or whatever the movement has to be able to eliminate that flaw. And if we can do that, I don't say a word during that process. I allow them to go forward. Martine talks a lot about that because Franz Bosch talks a lot about that. And just developing drills that are going to allow you to alleviate that or eliminate that problem without running your mouth too much. Because that's the biggest thing that coaches do negatively from my perspective.
Talk too much.
They talk too much. Talk way too much.
Yeah, I like something you said earlier too, which I don't hear enough of, and maybe it happens. But a lot of the courses we give also, I love doing this. I tell coaches, and I want to get your opinion and see what you've come up with on your own. Talk about invented things. A lot of times we see a drill, all of a sudden, boom, something comes to our mind. I could do it this way, and it works. And that doesn't mean you're trying to take credit that you invented something, but you got to be creative. Right?
Yeah.
You can't just follow and steal from everybody. You've got to be creative on your own. Give us some ideas of some things that you've been creative on. And I know it's not easy. We're on video, but we got podcasts too. It's not easy on a podcast, but something that, I think the foot plate is one of them. That possibly is something.
Yeah, there's a bunch of them. I've had, I used to kill a loop killer. Okay. A loop for me was this movement here with the arm before the player threw. So there was like a little loop here. Okay. So what I did is I got a piece of Velcro and I put a tennis ball in the crevice right here of the forearm and the bicep. Yep. And they weren't able to bend their hand past 90 degrees with it. So yeah. So we
you're trying to maintain that 90 degrees.
So a lot of my problems with kids were I had some kids that have loops, and that obviously is going to create some problems with the ulnar nerve because it sort of stretches it more than it should stretch.
Sure.
And that's one of the things. Another thing, before I got the foot plate and developed the foot plate, I actually had strings that were running from behind the mound to the front of the mound, and the string would be right on the pitcher's, if he's a right-handed pitcher, on his right knee. So that would force him whenever he really sunk into his back knee, he would feel the string. So that was sort of eliminating that fact that it would go to their toes. So there's all these little things that, I've also used that 2 screens where they throw, and I tell them they're inside of a corridor, okay, or a hall, And that's how they have to think when they're going towards home plate, is being in that corridor, going towards home plate and staying within the corridor. So there's a lot of different things that I've used over time, depending on the player's problems.
Yeah, because as you said, some things work for one person, some work, don't work for the other. But you're putting on constraints. It sounds like you're looking at the end result. Yeah, you're not necessarily always focused on the fundamental movements all the time.
No, that was a big point of in time when talking to Martine, when I realized that what I'd been doing for a long time, and I'd actually stopped 2 or 3 years before that, but I realized what I was doing in retrospect, that I was talking way too much. And I was just talking to players, and it was the worst thing I could have possibly been doing. So now what I'll do is I'll set up a pitcher with a drill, do the drill. I stand there and watch and evaluate, okay? But don't say a word. I might say something like, hey, you didn't do it right that time. That's it. But I won't be specific. I'll try to make sure that it's something that they can figure out for themselves, because it has to come from inside of them,
Love it. Love it, love it, love it. And the Italians, you're going to email me, but I'm Italian American. I'm the same way. That's the number one thing Italian coaches need to work on, because they love to talk. Okay, let's just face facts. We all love to talk, so we all have to work on it. So there's the number one advice for Italian coaches right now from Bill Holmberg and Pete Caliendo. Talk less, let them do more. But that's true for everybody around the world. I want to give a shout out to Richard Kanya. What's up, Richard? How are you? Good to see you, buddy. You mentioned Martin Nijhoff, which has been on our podcast before. Just had Paul Venner from the Dutch strength and conditioning coach for baseball. We've had, I believe it was we've had 2 or 3 Dutch coaches that are really outstanding. Hey, got to ask you this. Pitches. How do you determine, is it the player determines the pitches that he wants to develop or throw, or is it a combination of you guys talking it over? Where do you start? If I'm a pitcher.
You can sort of see now with Rhapsody and all the stuff that we're seeing from all the new innovation that's coming out. The way Rhapsody is and the way that TrackMan is, to a certain extent, you're almost, after you've used those analysis software type things, you're going to be forced to understand that some pitchers can only throw certain pitches because of the angle of their hand or the quality of their spin rate or whatever it might be. But some pitchers are better off. Like a lot of times we had guys throwing sinkers, when now the big thing is throwing the fastball up in the strike zone, because of high spin rate. So it basically, number one, comes down to if it stays within the parameters or the standard deviations that we're trying to look for when we're looking at Rhapsody and all those other analysis forms. So that is going to help you. The new analysis forms sort of help you decide what kind of pitches pitchers should be throwing, and it really depends on the characteristics of the pitcher and how well he can throw the specific pitches that you're asking for. So for me, obviously the number one is a fastball, okay? And I've always been a sinker guy and a changeup guy. So I try to basically tunnel those pitches, and we work a lot on tunneling those pitches. But again, if the Rhapsody is telling me something that give me information that it's telling me, hey, that kid can't throw a four-seam fastball because he doesn't have enough spin rate, then I'm going to have to look into different alternatives to solving the problem.
Now, a lot of coaches aren't going to have the Rhapsody. They're going to have to use their visual aspect to determine those things as far as adjusting, making adjustments with their pitchers.
Sure. And the thing is I always catch my pitchers. I'll go out there, I'll play catch with them all the time. And I can tell, after years and years of catching, I can almost tell from release and spin and what kind of movement we have, the pitch quality, more or less. I mean, I'm not going to tell you like the Rhapsody could or the TrackMan, but I can give you an idea about what's going to be, what could possibly be his greatest arsenal.
Hey, Bill, all pitchers are different. We know that. All players are different. Prior to a game, what a general routine for anybody prior to a game for a pitcher, coaches making sure that they're doing certain things they should be doing. What's a general routine before they actually pitch in a ball game?
I love for my pitcher to go with the with the strength and conditioning guy. And that's one thing. Johnny Natale, who I had with the Italian national team, and Jeff, when we worked with MLB, they always warmed up the pitcher and got him in a great spot. Depending on what the pitcher is, see, many times, unless I'm at the academy where I can dictate what our program is going to be on a daily basis, if I go with the Italian national teams, whether it be the seniors, juniors, whoever it is, I'm going to be more or less trying to adapt my program to what the pitcher's used to doing. So if the pitcher's used to doing this and I'm on an all-star team, in an all-star team situation, then I'm going to allow him to continue to do what he feels comfortable with. If I'm at the academy and I have a program, an annual program, a 9-10-month program, then I'm going to dictate how we're going to get warm and what kind of programs we're going to use to get warm and to be ready to pitch. And for me at the academy, it was wrist weights and it was Jaeger tubing. That's what we did. So that was after the strength and conditioning guy warmed the player up through dynamic movement skills. So it's really easy. I think the simple thing is getting them warm. The next thing is giving them a program where they can step into the game and be ready to pitch. Mm-hmm. And that's not always easy because some kids don't have an idea about what they're doing. They go to the right field corner, they're out there fooling around, and they really don't enter the game a lot of times with the proper number of pitches in their arm, nor do they have they worked on the proper pitch selection that you need to be able to be successful.
And I think that's where I was getting at, because I'm looking at, as you're training coaches around the world, you're going to be in different parts of the world, and not everybody knows this stuff. So like a basic coach who's starting off or has a couple years experience, he wants to make sure that his pitcher at least is doing certain things, whether it be some warm-ups, some running, some, like you said, tubing, wrist weights, some flexibility things. But then we got into, they got to throw a little bit, and then you got to get into your some pitching off the mound before you go in. So give us just a general idea of, as they get to the mound, what are they going to be doing on the mound? Are they, how many throws or maybe what kind of routine a general routine?
We're going to establish our routine during practice. Okay. So our whenever it starts with so when we start our bullpen day, for example, okay, that's going to be our game day program. So we're going to start off with the strength and conditioning coach. He's going to get a dynamic stretch going, warm up. And after we go from the warm up, we're going to probably go into our banding, tubing, maybe wrist weights, depending on the player. And that's going to be stage 2. Then we're going to start throwing. So it's going to be a throwing program. So what I do is we actually have a throwing program. Might not be as complicated, let's say, as it would be during practice, because it'd probably be a lot shorter with a shorter number of throws. But I go through the throwing program right away because I know that the comfort level by the pitcher, he's going to feel very comfortable if he follows his routine. So I just try to keep him on the same routine that I would normally have during practice. So a bullpen day would be the same thing, the same things that I do during a game day.
When you get to the mound, everybody's going to be different, obviously, and he's going to do his routine in the bullpen before he gets into a game. I realize everybody's going to be a little different, but in general, are you trying to get your control down first? Are you throwing some pitches? You're mixing it up?
I do this all the time, Pete. We start off with our pitchers, and I start my catchers about 2 yards in front of home plate. And why do I do that? Because I want them, number one, I hate the pitcher not throwing off the mound because I think there's a timing problem with the slope. So sure. I look for my pitchers to throw off the mound when they're warming up. And even when they're practicing, I don't do a lot of flat ground. The only time we do a lot of flat ground is when we're doing spin drills because I want that timing. Because the biggest problem for me, for the pitchers, is a little bit of mechanics, but timing and rhythm is fundamental. That's fundamental to throwing strikes. I mean, anybody that tells you anything different, they're out of their minds. You have to have rhythm. You have to have timing. And if you do have the timing and the rhythm, then you're obviously going to be able to stay down in the zone and you're going to be able to throw strikes. But if I'm throwing from the front of the mound and not off the slope and the catcher's behind home plate, that's not going to help me create any timing and rhythm while I'm warming up. So I get them on the mound, the catcher moves up, the catcher goes down, and this is even more important for for what I'm trying to accomplish, which is creating play. Because the catcher being closer is going to force them to be on top of the ball more and be able to create that plane going down and throw them in the lower half of the strike zone, lower quarter of the strike zone.
Fantastic. Love it. And we're, as we come to the end, we still got some questions here, but at the end, just so you know, I kind of open it up and let our guests always say something to our coaches, players, and parents around the world. Anything that, you know, because we can't cover everything, but anything that might have been important that I may not ask the right question and we couldn't get into that conversation. Anything you want to say at the end, it's open game there. But a couple things. One, I think something I'm always interested in is when during a game, and I know it's a general question, but it'd be interesting to see your perspective on it. When a pitcher, when you need to go out to the mound to talk to the pitcher, okay, I realize it's for different situations, but give our audience an idea some of the things you might tell pitchers and why you tell them certain things or what you've told them in the past. Could be good, could be bad, could be you learned from it. But things that go on in those conversations, and you know, I'm not talking about all the swear words, but the things that go on in the conversations, you know, that can help coaches understand how to deal with that pitcher in a game. Because that's not easy. That's a mental aspect too.
So I'd never go on the mound to talk about mechanics, ever.
That's important to know.
I'll usually talk to pitchers about who's coming up next. What does this guy, what's this next hitter hit? How are we going to get him out? That's probably the second thing that I will talk to them about. But there's many. Okay, we're playing the United States in the World Cup, 2007, which is a while ago. And we're beating the United States for the first time in Italian baseball's history. We've never beaten the United States. Okay. And that was a pretty good club. They had Longoria, they had Rujana, they had Delman Young, they had a lot of really good players. Sure. And we're playing them in Taiwan, and we're up 5-2, I believe it was, or 5-3. And they had bases loaded, and we had 2 outs. And Alessandro Maestri was a pitcher. And you know Alessandro, he pitched in Japan. He's a pretty good pitcher. Yep. So we had him closing that game. So I walked out, and at that time I was with the Cubs. So I just seen Alessandro in spring training the same year, because this was in November, I believe. And I walked up to the mound, and I got all the guys around me, the Italian kids, and I had a couple American guys standing there. And one of the catcher was an American guy, and he goes, and I go. I looked around, I looked up. I said, "Hey, man." I looked down at his shoes. I said, "Where'd you get those shoes?" He said, "Well, the Cubs gave them to me for, before the season started." I said, "Man, I love those shoes. How come you didn't get a pair for me?" And I turned around and walked away, because there's some situations that you don't need to say anything. The players know. They know. You just go out there, you give them an idea of what you'd like them to do for the next hitter, and they know the situation. Just try to get their mind off of the situation they're in at that moment and try to refocus for the next hitter. And of course, did it work? Yes. The next hitter, Alessandro, struck out, and we beat the United States, and everybody was happy, and that was the end of it. So yeah, sometimes you don't say anything. Sometimes it's better not to say anything. And yeah, I've gone to the mound, and I've just stood there for about 20 seconds, and remember Cody Chilo, a good pitcher that we had, a sidearm, a very good pitcher for the Italian national team. I didn't say a word, and I just looked at all the infielders and turned around and walked away. And I heard Cody, when I'm walking off, "Well, what do you got to say? What do you got to tell me?" And I just didn't turn around. I just kept walking right to the dugout. So I got his attention, which was good. And that's all you're trying to do. You just got to change that mindset for a second, let them refocus. Or if it's something mechanical, don't say it on the mound. Tell them in between innings, okay? And number 3 is probably the most important thing, is making sure that they know what you expect, what the catcher is going to expect for the next hitter, and also what that hitter doesn't hit, just to give them a game plan.
Awesome. Love it. And what about, guys, when we're talking about, it's easy when a guy throws 30 pitches and he gave up 3 runs. Okay, you're going to take him out. But what are some of the things that you're looking at, because you don't want that big inning to occur? What are some of the things you're looking at that might change your mind and want to take that pitcher out? Because that's not an easy task, whether it's for a manager or for a pitching coach, to decide when you take that pitcher out at any level. It's not an easy decision.
You know, I like to give pitchers, and this depends on the manager because, you know, I was with Marco Mazzieri. I've been with a lot of different managers, but and Mike Piazza now is a manager for Team Italy, and you know, we work very well together. You know, he's a great guy, and we have a terrific relationship. So you know, when that comes up in the World Baseball Classic in 2021, we'll definitely have a conversation about it. What I do like to have pitchers do, though, is I like for them to start a clean inning. I don't like to bring guys in. A lot of times I hear coaches, and this has been the case for years and years and years, I hear coaches say, well, if the first runner gets on, we're going to take him out. Well, so if you're thinking about taking him out, if the first runner gets on, then take him out now to give the reliever a clean table, you know? So that to me is that's the most important thing, getting the pitcher out and not putting him in a situation where he has to try to clean up somebody's mess, you know? That's number one. And you know, number two is pitch counts to me are relevant, but they're not relevant. You know, they're relevant because if I know the pitcher, there's some guys who can throw 100 pitches, other guys are really good at 80, and you have to understand how many pitches your guy really has in his arm, and if he's laboring, because it's not, you know, people want to use that pitch count and say, oh, this is 100 pitches and you got to get him out of there. Well, you know, maybe we should have got him out at 90, or we should have got him out at 80, because not everybody's the same. We all use, you know, even announcers on TV are saying, well, he's 110 pitches and he's got to get out of there. Well, you know, what if he throws 113? Is he going to get out of it? I mean, what's the deal? You know, if I can get him through this inning, then I can give the next pitcher a clean slate. So, yeah, it's not an easy decision ever, but it's also, you have to follow your rules, the rules that you make before the game. For example, when we played the World Baseball Classic in 2013, we'd make it, you know, actually a list of pitchers, 5-6 pitchers. Okay, this guy's going to come in for this. This is the starter. This guy does this. This Jason Grilly's going to close. So we already knew before the game started what we're going to do. Now the problem with coaches is they don't always adhere to what their original plan was. Yeah. They want to change, and I get it. You need to adjust. I get that. Yeah. But to me, if you believed it before the game, why aren't you going to believe it during the game? Because you have the same information before the game that you have now, maybe a little bit more now. But on the other hand, you wanted to do it before the game. Why would you not do it during the game? And that's where I see the biggest problem is with young coaches, especially. And
here's a great, you know, what I'm looking at this because it leads in perfectly. Okay, now I've got to pick a reliever. I've got my game plan. I know what a reliever is. Problem is the other team's not following your game plan, and now he brings in a certain hitter, you know, as a pinch hitter, and now you need to do something. That's not easy either, picking a relief pitcher who's going to fit in with that particular hitter. How does that, I mean, I know it's not, you know, it's not perfect. It doesn't fit in perfect. That's why you have the manager and the pitching coach making decisions. How does that work? Well, you know, lefty, righty is always an important factor. You know, you always look to be able to throw to arm side hitters, you know, that's important. But again, this should be evaluated before the game. You should already have a plan before the game even starts. Knowing your opponent and knowing who you have in the bullpen, you should have a great idea of how you're going to attack that team. And the deviation is going to be very small if you prepared properly. Now, there's going to be exceptions to the rule, of course. But in general, I'd say 80% of the time, I'm going to follow my plan. 85% of my time, I'm going to follow my plan because I know that's a well thought out plan. Now, somebody might bring up something like Mike might say, well, how come we're doing this or why because this guy against right-handers, for example, he's hitting 203. Okay. Against lefties, he's hitting 290. So the decision is sort of made by the information you have, you know. Yeah. So yeah, it's not an easy, but again, when we did the World Baseball Classic in 2013, I had scouting reports that were this thick. Okay. I got some from Inside Edge. I would do it on my own. I would go back and look at video.
I have Jamie Storvik in Taiwan that's been helping me out for the last few years.
Jamie, sure.
He's with the Reds, and he's been helping us advance a little bit, and he is awesome. He's really, really, really a good advanced scout. But, through all these guys that I trust, I have to trust somebody. I have to trust somebody. So either I trust myself in my eyes, or I trust the guys that are working with me, or I trust the coaches that are working with me. But we have to trust each other, because the decisions we're going to make, we're going to have to live with them. So once I have the information, I pull the trigger. I mean, I don't deviate too much from the norm. I try to make sure I keep my plan, because again, if you go back, Pete, and you go to the pitchers in the bullpen and you tell them this is a plan, how many times have you heard pitchers after the game saying, "Man, you had me dry humping out there in the bullpen for 4 innings," right?
Yeah.
And that pisses pitchers off. So what I'm trying to do is, if I get you hot, I want to be the kind of guy that if I get you hot, you're going in. Okay. No, I'm not going to have you warm up for 5 or 6 innings in the bullpen. No, if I get you hot, you're going in. Because if I trust you, I trust you. Players love to have a plan. They know that if they have a plan, they can develop the mentality they need to be able to really act out that plan. So bottom line is, they have to have confidence in what you're doing and how you're treating them. Okay? Does that make any sense? I mean,
And also, and since we're on that, we got a great question here from Dimitri, our good friend in New York, who helps Belarus baseball. He's the guy that brought Pujols to Belarus. Unbelievable. They had a great experience. He does so much work for them out there. But his question to you, and he actually asked you, he says, recommendation for European coaches, how to transition from managing pitchers from a weekend series to a 5 to 7 day tournament. That's an interesting question.
Yeah, it is. And the answer is pretty simple from my perspective. Okay. What we try to do is have a plan. My main thing is making a good plan. Okay. Knowing your pitchers, knowing what they can and can't do. Second thing is you have to scout. You have to advance scout. You have to know exactly. You can't have anybody come up that's going to be a surprise. Okay. You have to know the other players, and your players have to know the other players. And once you have those two things, okay, what I like to do is, I know hitters know that every pitcher has one pitch, and that one pitch is a fastball. So what I'll do once in a while, especially at the beginning of the game, and I hope not too many people from the World Baseball Classic are watching this, but we'll throw any pitch in any count, especially at the beginning of the game. Okay, all the stuff about in short series, one pitch, it's like Game 7 of the World Series. Every game is like Game 7 of the World Series. So if you miss one pitch, that could kick you out of the tournament. So I never, ever give in. We don't give in. We just keep battling and battling and battling, competing, okay, and making sure that we're throwing our best pitch in the best situation. And sometimes that might be our changeup. We might have a great changeup. We might have a great curveball. We might have a great slider. 2013 at the Classic, we had Maestri, and who's got a great slider, fastball slider guy. We had Thiago da Silva, who's a fastball 89, 90, but he had a great changeup. And we try to utilize our best pitch, because many times I see guys going on the mound, they say, "Oh, well, that guy hit the ball over the fence, but he hit my third best pitch." Well, what are you throwing that for, you dummy? So throw your best pitch in the best situation. Might be changeup, might be a slider, might be a fastball. I don't know what it is, but that pitch better be thrown in situations where we need it out.
Love it. Not only do I love it, but Dimitri gives you a high five. He's giving you the high five, saying, awesome. He loves the response and he appreciates it. Hey, I got 2 more questions for you. This is fantastic. And folks, Bill's not going to tell you, but I follow Bill. I see him all the time, all over the world. And once Bill started, matter of fact, I remember when he first started with the Italian national team as their pitching coach, different levels. You can see the difference immediately in the pitchers and also in the game results, because that's what controls the game. I don't care what anybody says. You got the pitching, you control everything. But here's my question, because this comes up 1,000 times every time, and I get it that there could be several different answers because of different levels. We're talking about young kids, older guys, professionals, national teams. There's all kinds of different levels. But pitch calling, big debate. Who does the calling? And obviously, if you got a good plan, hopefully the plan tells you what you're going to do. But sometimes you have to adjust the plan. So where do you start, Bill? Because you might be working with a 12-year-old in Belarus, or you might be working with your national team. Where do you start with pitch calling? Who decides all this?
Well, with the under 18s, World Championship, European Championship, any tournament we ever ran, we played the Dominican 7 games. We've been all over the world with that team under 18s, and I would call the pitches. And the reason I would do that is because whenever we played a tournament, I would actually physically scout myself with Mike Piazza, who I might add was with me many, many times.
Yeah.
And we would go and advanced scout. So I'd get an idea get a feel, because from film you can only get so much. But if you get a feel, that's why I don't understand how MLB teams can advance scout through video. To me, that's just a really weird thing, because I get a feel for the game when I'm there that I can't get from film. I can't get from film. Right. So basically, I start off by trying to get an idea of what we're doing. And then from there, I'll just take it from there,
What do you do with the younger players, young coaches that are working with kids? Does the coach begin to teach them that first and then kind of go into, because they're going to have to make decisions sooner or later in games also, as they get a little older at some period? Where does this all start?
Well, what I did with the junior national team at the academy is I would call the first 3 innings, and then let's say the practice game, and then I'd allow the catcher to throw or to call the next 6 or whatever. I would allow, but again, you have to teach them how to call games. You can't just send them out there, because you're doing a disservice to the catcher and you're doing a disservice to the pitcher. If that guy's throwing 1 down all the time and the guy's best pitch is a changeup, there's something wrong there, So I think that you should develop that pitch calling ability. I don't think it's not a right. Okay. It's not a right. It's more something that needs to be earned by the catcher. Okay. But on the other hand, you also have to trust the catcher. So if I look at guys that I had in the academy, I can trust every single one of them because they know how I think. But if I get a new guy, and it's happened, if I get a new guy that I'm calling the pitches, even with the seniors, because I scouted the other team, I know what they do. That other guy doesn't know anything. Now I would tell him, hey, if you want to call your own game, then come scout with me before the game. Okay? Tomorrow, you come and scout with me, and we'll sit and talk about all these hitters, one after the other. So we develop a game plan. Okay, not that you just throw down one because one is convenient, or you can throw a runner out at second. No. Okay, we're trying to get people out. That's the key. So you have to know what you want to call in certain situations, knowing what the hitter is, what the pitcher is, what the situation is. I mean, there's so many intangibles that you really can't generalize and say this is one way to do it, because it's all different. So a guy like Alberto Mineo, who was the national team catcher, the AA catcher, we have a great relationship. He can look at me and he knows what I want him to call. So it depends on the relationship the pitching coach has with the catcher too. And you have to have a great relationship. It's underestimated, the relationship that we need to have between the catcher and the pitching coach. Extremely utilized. You have to develop that relationship. Develop the relationship, build that trust. Because if the pitcher knows that you have a trust with the trust with the catcher, then that pitcher is going to be much more confident too. So
and that leads perfectly into my last question. Now the pitcher and catcher come off the field and they go into the dugout. You see sometimes the pitching coach go there, or sometimes the pitcher and catcher are talking. Explain what goes on there and what can benefit by having that type of talk when they go back out again.
I'm a big believer. I have a pitching chart, and I can't see all the pitches from the dugout, but I get a good idea. I can see the way the hitter responds and the way the ball moves. Have a good idea about what my guy's throwing, and I have that pitching chart in the dugout. And after the inning's over, I'll sit with the catcher. I usually don't do it with the pitcher too much because I don't want him to lose concentration on what his objectives and results should be, you know. But the catcher, I will sit with him and I'll ask him, hey, why'd you call this? Why'd you call that? Why'd you do this? Why'd you do that? So it's more my relationship with the catcher than it is my relationship with the pitchers. The pitchers are gonna have a good relationship with me just because they know they can trust me. And the catcher's gonna actually be the brains. He's gonna take part of my information and part of his information, and we're gonna develop a plan together.
Fantastic, Bill. Awesome. Last thing, this is no longer baseball outside the box with Pete Caliendo. It's baseball outside the box with Bill Holmberg. So your last advice to our coaches, players, and parents around the world, what would that be?
Well, my pet peeve is throwing. So I would say the most important thing that I could leave these coaches, players, whoever is listening to this podcast, is that we need to throw well. We need to throw well because from throwing, you get defenders. From throwing, you get pitchers. Remember, we only have one DH on the field, right? So all those other 8 or 9 guys need to be able to throw. So if you're going to concentrate on one thing in international baseball, okay, it has to be the throwing mechanic, okay, and the pitching mechanic. And after that, we can play with anybody in the world if I have pitchers and I have good defenders. Okay, those are the 2 things that I need. All I got to do then is score a couple runs, which isn't always easy.
No, it's not. That's why it's a great game. And amen to that. Throwing, pitching, making sure your kids can throw well. Get everybody to throw well, and you're going to be a lot more successful. Bill, this is awesome, man. Love it. Thanks for being on the show. Wish you hopefully you get a flight here pretty quick, go back to Italy. We'll have to do another one of these only via Italy.
Yeah, we're going to need to kick this virus's ass here in the States and also in Italy finally. So I might have to go back and see what I can do about that.
Yeah, and I agree with you. We are going to beat this, no doubt in my mind, and things are going to be great all over the world. Again, that's Bill Holmberg in Miami right now, hoping to get home to Italy. The pitching coach for the Italian national team in a World Baseball Classic, along with Mike Piazza, the manager, also the coordinator, instructor for MLB when it comes to Europe and Africa. I was almost going to say Asia. Africa. I want to thank Bill Holmberg. I want to thank Brian Kroc, our producer with the Lineup Media Group. Thank you very much. They're our hosts. I want to thank everybody that was on Facebook Live, YouTube. We're going to put that up today. Also on the podcast. Thanks for listening. Thanks for being loyal listeners, because you guys are really developing our show. And we ask you all the time, please try your best to get the show out on YouTube, get it out on Facebook. Just send it to people. Get the podcast out. We're on all the social media. We're all over Twitter, Facebook. We've got it all. You name it, we got it. And we are multimedia right now because we're all over. I can see Bill on YouTube. I can have you guys on Facebook, and we're going to put it on podcast. So again, folks, thanks for joining Baseball Outside the Box. I'm your host, Pete Caliendo from our Chicago studios. He's Bill Holmberg from Miami right now. Adios, ciao. And by the way, God bless everybody in Italy and everybody around the world. We'll see you on the next show.